You see that they try to imply that people who want to look beyond the atom and see things a bit deeper, that they're the skeptics, they're the sensible, grounded ones who are only interested in the evidence. But actually, it's many people who study what is beyond the atom, beyond the brain, and so on, are actually doing it based on scientific evidence. And it's actually the people who call themselves the skeptics who are actually the ones who are actually peddling pseudoscience and are stuck in that to their faith in matter being all that there is, despite the fact that quantum theory effectively disproved that nearly 100 years ago.
And just real quick, I'd like to introduce my guest, his bio. He's recognized as a leading scientific expert in the Shroud of Turin. If anybody's not familiar with that, it's actually a burial cloth that was wrapped around Jesus, or that's what we believe it to be. Many people believe it to be. And then Dr. Silverman is also a medical doctor, a clinical doctor with a background in physics. For over 30 years, he has been conducting research on the mind-matter continuum, near-death experiences, and the Shroud of Turin. You're in the right place for near-death experiences, by the way, because I am constantly talking about near-death experiences. I've had interviews with a lot of near-death experiencers, and some of the that I want to expand upon. And then, so you have presented findings in peer-reviewed scientific papers and international scientific conferences, and you live in Buckinghamshire, England. And go ahead and give me a little bit about your background, sir.
Well, my background, I'm a medical doctor, but as you just were reading, I've been researching these topics for several decades now. First got interested in the Turin Shroud when a friend of mine showed me a recording of an excellent BAFTA award-winning film called The Silent Witness, which was a documentary about scientific research that had been done on the Shroud of Turin during the 1970s. And what amazed me about it really was that when they were trying to account for how these scientists, people from NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Los Alamos and all that, that they were looking at the shroud, trying to understand how the image got there. And when they went, they assumed it was some kind of religious relic, which it isn't. It's an archaeological artifact, and they assumed that they'd go there and find the brush strokes in a few minutes, and then they could go home again. But they actually found that there was no way, even using at that stage 20th century technology, or even now with 21st century technology, there's no way that anyone would be able to replicate the main features of that image in its entirety. And the one idea that they had, which seemed consistent with the findings on the shroud, is that the image was formed by a short, intense burst of radiant energy that came from the dead body of the man that the shroud once wrapped. Of course, people might be familiar with the 1988 carbon dating and think that that showed it was medieval, but they may not be aware that has later been shown that the part of the cloth that was tested wasn't representative of the rest of the cloth. It was a part that consisted mostly of material that had been weaved in later as a repair after the cloth had become damaged.
Yeah. Wow, that's extraordinary. So you, by the way, I don't know, I didn't really mention this as we were planning for this show today, but I have a little bit of history with Barry Schwartz.
Oh yeah,
Now, I'm sure you're familiar with him, right? Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
my go ahead. I'll hear your thoughts on Barry Schwartz.
No, I mean he's a wonderful, wonderful chap. I've met him a few times now at various conferences, and actually the photographs of the shroud, which have been used in my book, are with kind permission from him and his charitable STERA Foundation. Yeah, great chap.
Yeah, so just a little background about my history. Now, granted, I don't really know him like on a personal level necessarily, but um, I met him through. Okay, so my mother, when she was actually still living, she passed probably 12, 13 years ago now. But she was dating a gentleman that was basically like best friends with Barry Shorts, and I
Mm.
guess were they grew up together. So he was visiting, and I guess the way he was introduced to me is like, "This is the Barry Schwartz," and I was like, "Okay, whatever. I don't even know who this guy is." So I ended up, learning about him later on in life, and I did a little research and like, oh my gosh, I met Barry Schwartz. So
He actually was a member of the STERP team, the Shroud of Turin Research Project team in
mhm.
1978. That they were given several days of round-the-clock access to the shroud for all the scientific research, and he was taking a lot of the photographs there as well, because he's a professional photographer.
Yeah. So about the shroud. Now, this has not been a huge focus of mine for my research, but I know that there's a lot of people that give it a lot of credence and its authenticity. I would like to learn a little more about why this is believed to be the cloth of Christ. Now, I don't even know. I got a few pages into your book. I think it was about 140 pages, but I didn't finish it, and I know I probably left a lot of good information. Um, I'll eventually get to it, I'm sure. But the
Hmm.
bottom line is there's a lot of naysayers that actually would dismiss that it's authentic, and
Yes.
you actually point out that there is a lot of science
Oh yes.
that can back it up. Now, this light that projected from the body actually basically burned an image into like a negative photo, correct?
It's technically it's not a burn. It's like the term that's often used is accelerated aging. Chemically, we call it oxidation and
Okay.
dehydration of the cellulose, which makes up some of the linen fibrils. So yeah, it's and the only reason why we many people believe that it was a burst of radiant energy that formed it is based on the empirical scientific evidence of the looking at the image chemically and photomicrographically, because it doesn't consist of anything that's been added to the cloth. It's only 200 nanometers in thickness, which is like 1/5000th of a millimeter, and studies have been done mainly by Dr. Paolo Di Lazzaro's team in the Atomic Energy Institute in Italy, where they have found that similar
Mm-hmm.
microscopic changes to linen can occur due to short, intense bursts from ultraviolet lasers, and it seems that
Yeah.
for this to have happened to form the whole of the image, though, would have required, if it were done by lasers, thousands of billions of watts, which we don't even have in modern 21st century technology. So Dr. De Lazzaro, famously in a newspaper interview, said that to think that a medieval forger could have done that when we can't do it today is to sort of assume some
Yes.
kind of miracle, that the forgery itself was a miracle if they were able to do that when the technology wasn't there. Mm.
That's a really good point. I mean, there's a lot of things in antiquity that you'll actually see. like megalithic structures and things that are difficult to explain scientifically. And these are the topics that I love to touch on.
Sure. The interesting thing with the shroud is that a lot of its features weren't apparent in medieval times and weren't even apparent in most of the 19th century until it was first photographed by a gentleman called Secundipia, and he saw the story goes that he nearly dropped his photographic negative in shock, because if you look at an image of the shroud itself, it seems like a pale sepia, sort of yellowish image with the faint imprint of a man on it. But when you look at the photographic negative, it looks much clearer and more apparent. And because that's one of the other things. If someone were doing it as a forgery, why would they make it so that it only appears clear using technology that came hundreds of years later? How would they know about that? And also, how did they know about the forensic, anatomical, and pathophysiological knowledge that we have now, which verifies that forensically, the cloth tells a story forensically? It's like a CSI evidence that you can see the torturing and how this, and in particular, the nails were through the wrists, not the hands, as is always depicted on medieval images. And there appears to have been a cap of sharp objects like thorns that had been placed on the head, and he'd been pierced on the side. This was clearly a victim of Roman crucifixion. And I can go into this in detail if you wish, but it is in the book that we can deduce from pollen evidence and from historical evidence happened somewhere in the vicinity of Jerusalem in March or April, between the years 6 and 66, whether we call that Common Era or AD. That's where that cloth was exposed to the elements during that time, and the crucifixion of the victim of who was crucified, whose image we see on there, that's when that happened. So there is plenty of evidence in that sense pointing to being consistent with this having been the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, so my view on this is, regardless of whether it is Jesus of Nazareth or not, begs the question that there is something that with this evidence as far as what it is and what would scientifically cause it to preserve over so many years this image. So as far as the shroud is concerned, is that the thing that motivated you to expand into the science of that kind of branched out from there, I guess, as far as like consciousness or light energy and things like that?
The two sides that were interesting me was, one, a fascination in terms of how did this happen, how did this image get on the cloth, and also to try to understand the nature of what consciousness actually is. That we know people may doubt the contents of their consciousness, that they may consider whether something might have been imagined or dreamt or whatever. But one thing that, if you think about it, you can never really doubt is that you're conscious at all. That even as Descartes said, the very fact of your being aware means there must be an awareness, if you see what I mean, even if so it was those two things. And what was interesting is that actually the two seem to tie in together, that through understanding consciousness a bit more and understanding physics and seeing how, despite the way that what you might think if you look on the media, and people often think that that physics is a very materialistic subject, that all scientists must think that matter is all that there is. But there are many eminent scientists. In fact, I've got some books by some of them behind me on the shelf. Many scientists, such as, for example, Andre Linde, Erwin Schrödinger, and many others, that they actually have seen through reason and through the evidence of science that consciousness is something fundamental. It's not the product of some kind of electrical process that goes on in the brain. And in fact, what we're seeing from quantum theory is that it's the other way around. Rather than consciousness being made by matter, matter only has properties due to the existence of consciousness. So that until the electron is observed, it's neither a wave nor a particle, and so on.
Yeah. Real quick, one of the listeners actually asked for the title of your book, which is go ahead.
Yeah.
It's a burst of conscious light. Yeah. Yeah. So burst of conscious light. So in fact, he was just telling me that he was going to get your audiobook. So but yeah, that's the idea. That's one of the reasons I brought you on the show today, is because I have some followers that would definitely be interested in the topics that you're bringing to the table. And so for those of you hearing this, definitely go get his book. He has a lot of really amazing stuff that he's touching on. It's not just the Shroud of Turin. That's really just the foot in the door, as far as I can tell. And so like I have a quick question about or memory or thought process. So like the way that the brain operates, you have basically like memories that are systematically categorized in a way you can archive based on a sign.
Well, it's interesting you say. Sorry.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It's interesting you say that, because no one's ever proved that memories are located in the brain as such. It's sort of assumed that they are. And it's assumed that somehow thought is made by the brain as well. But the analogy that I use for this is that you turn on your radio and you hear a song, but no one in their right mind thinks that the radio is singing to them, or that it wrote the song, or that it means what the song means. The radio doesn't have any concept of that meaning. A brain cannot hold or make or understand meaning. It's not actually, the brain is not aware. You are aware, and your awareness has influence on what goes on in the brain. It's like a transducer rather than a generator of thought and thinking and experience.
Yeah, I've likened the brain to a receiving device, kind of like we're in a Avatar type body, like the movie, and we actually have a receiver, like antenna, that's connected somehow to this other realm of existence where our consciousness operates from, and that's kind of the way I see it. But again, it's all just speculation on my part. You probably have done a lot more investigation as far as see. A lot of people that I talk to will say, I want some hard evidence for an afterlife, or something like, as far as consciousness transcending the brain. And you know, people cannot accept that. You know, I don't think that our reality here is. So the experiences that a lot of people have when they, you know, their body passes away just for a brief moment, they say that their experiences are ineffable. They cannot go back and explain what they've experienced.
To some extent, but then there are the veridical experiences as well, which have been, you know, documented to a great extent by eminent researchers like Pim van Lommel and Peter Fenwick and so on, where they experience things that are happening at the time that they couldn't have known about. Even people who have been blind since birth have seen things during NDEs. People have been able to recount specific details of their resuscitation, or things that were being spoken about while they were unconscious, while their brainwaves were flat. And even, for example, there are stories people have told the consultant, I saw a slipper on a ledge several stories up when I left my body, and I was looking at everything. And the person went and checked and had no reason to believe in such a thing as an NDE, other than some process in a dying brain, and found that what the person had seen was actually there. So you see, this is the proof. This is the actual verifiable, empirical, scientific proof that those people were looking for. And there's, it's very reasonable to look for it, but it's there. You can find it because it's there. There is verifiable empirical truth. proof that shows that when the brain stops functioning, the mind is still functioning.
Yeah, I think this is where people struggle with authority when it comes to, so like oftentimes people will appeal to peer review, and they'll say, okay,
Yes.
because you've been reviewed, when you've been reviewed by your peers, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak,
Yeah.
then you're more
That,
credible
but well,
because you haven't been shut down.
Pim van Lommel, who kindly wrote a little thing on the cover of my book, because he thought it was quite good. But he actually had a article about near-death experiences in a very eminent medical journal known as The Lancet, which is one of the top UK medical journals, one of the top medical journals in the world. And that was a peer-reviewed article based on his research on near-death experiences, showing that these were actually real. Now, and that they were not relying on activity in the brain. Then, for example, I've got a book behind me on the shelf by a professor of physics at Stanford called Andre Linder, where he's got a book that he wrote on something called inflationary cosmology, which is very sort of specialized. Sort of advanced physics, and he's one of the world's leading authorities on that. And from thinking about the evidence in quantum theory, he realized that consciousness must be fundamental. It's not made by matter, and he actually wrote that in the book. And he told an anecdote about that his publishers, when they saw that he put that in the book, they said, talking about consciousness and saying it's fundamental and not made by matter and it's beyond the atom, you could lose the respect of your colleagues and your readers. And he said, if I don't include it, I'll lose my self-respect. Because you see, these intelligent people, such as Dr. Van Lommel and Professor Linder, they are not willing to deny reason and good sense, because the evidence actually proves that consciousness is fundamental and is not made by matter. It's just it's a dogma in science to say that the only thing that's there is material. It's actually pseudoscience, which is interesting, because scientists will often accuse people who believe in consciousness being eternal and call that pseudoscience, but really their belief they're holding resolute to this notion that matter is all that there is, in defiance of all the evidence that's been there in quantum theory for nearly 100 years, is actually based on their position of faith that matter should be all that there is. And because it goes against all the evidence and it's just based on their faith, it is actually pseudoscience. Materialism is pseudoscience.
It is, and I can't help but agree, just based on the fact that as science or scientists should always evaluate all of the evidence and not reject evidence. And I feel like oftentimes they'll reject this evidence, which is verified out-of-body experiences. And these are the things that are particularly interesting to me, because like I always bring up Pam Reynolds' case, and she is a very famous near-death experience case. And now her brain was completely stopped to do surgery on it, and her body was cooled down. Her blood was drained and she was actually experiencing, seeing everything that was happening around her body. And I don't know if you're familiar, but she had these things in her ears to look for a spike in the brain activity. But they could see that there was no brain activity. It was completely dead. Sorry, when my phone rings, it actually cut me off. So I had to shut it down real quick. Okay, so anyways, I'm very fascinated by these out-of-body experiences. And hold on a second. So now you had mentioned Pim von Lommel. I actually I followed some of his stuff, but I would like to do a lot more investigating with some of the research he's put out there. And Peter Fenwick actually was another one that I have looked into quite a bit. And He's with the Neuro Foundation. They do a lot of talks and stuff, and I actually and then I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. Names don't come to my mind as easily because sometimes I'm not great with names. But the Aware study. What's his name? I can't remember.
Sampania?
Anyways, but
was it Sampania?
yeah, Sampania, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
I
So
think
these are
he's
the
based
things
in
that
Southampton in the UK.
Yes, yes, and yeah. So I actually, again, I always gravitate to near-death experiences because I feel like it is a lot of information that isn't being looked at by science and reality. I mean, it's almost like there's some consensus view that says you can't take somebody's word for it. But
Well, you
the
see,
problem is there's like
the thing is you don't need to.
There's millions of, yeah.
Because it's not
Go ahead.
subjective. This is verifiable evidence, which you don't. And even without the near-death experiences, quantum theory itself demonstrates the central and primal nature of consciousness. If you, I mean, I explain this in detail in the book, quoting many. Scientific sources of scientists that have gone before who have actually confirmed this, such as Erwin Schrödinger, Max Planck, who are two of the founders of quantum theory, Eugene Wigner, whose book I also have behind me, that many of these researchers have seen the evidence that even matter itself depends upon consciousness for its existence.
Yeah, so I don't know if you were aware, but I actually I put a documentary together that actually got my channel some good recognition. But it was called Frequency of Light and Patterns of Reality. And basically, I was trying to point out that there is a lot of evidence that frequency is a huge part of this reality, and not. I mean, the way that we can perceive frequency is we can see like radio waves and Bluetooth, transmissions and things like that. And I actually think that somehow there's a communication going on the physical level of consciousness communicating. Now, maybe that we can talk a little bit about how consciousness, because there's a lot of people in my community that are talking about how there's some sort of collective consciousness that's creating and things like that. I'm sure you've gotten into that thought process.
Well, firstly, I would say that I don't believe that consciousness is a material process. So it's not actually made out of anything that has physical properties such as frequency, wavelength, and so on. Consciousness is actually the fundamental ground of existence itself, rather than being a thing, which is interesting because when you actually come to, if someone asks you to define what is consciousness, okay, and when you try and do it, you realize that it's quite difficult to define, because when you define something, you always describe it in terms of something else. So you'd say, for example, what is a cup? Well, that's what you a receptacle that you put a drink into. So someone has to know what a drink is, so that it's already something in the same frame of reference as the cup. Or if when you say the sky is blue, someone says, what do you mean blue? And you can tell them something else that's blue. What if they've never seen the color blue before? How do you describe what it's like? And then take it a step back from that. How do you describe what it's like to see at all, or to perceive, to be there in order to know? How can you describe what that is? You can't break it down into things, into elements of frequency, size, weight, color, that you could program into a computer. You can't make consciousness come out as a machine code, as ones and zeros, because it's fundamentally not that. And that's why, and which is another theme of the book, consciousness can never be manufactured. So artificial intelligence, you see, the point about intelligence is that, and this was pointed out by Professor Roger Penrose, who wrote a great book about 30 years ago called The Emperor's New Mind, where
Yes.
basically he points out that everyone's talking about artificial intelligence and wanting to be expert about it, but until a little child might say, but hang on a second, this is an object. What do you mean? How can it be someone? It's only something. How to be intelligent, you have to understand. To understand, you have to be aware. You can see when you type 1 + 1 = on your computer or on a pocket calculator, and an answer comes out, the machine doesn't know what 1 is or what addition is or what equals is any more than an abacus knows what those things are. It's purely a mechanical object. So being a mechanical object, it can never understand or perceive or be aware. But people say, oh yes, but that can't be, what you're saying can't be true, because the brain is a machine, it's a computer, and through that we're aware. But then, as you yourself pointed out, NDEs happen when the brain waves stop, which proves that our mind, our consciousness, is not a product of that brain.
So would you think that maybe the brain is a processing device? So basically you could say, everything that flows into the brain electronically has to be distributed. I mean, your body obviously controls, or your brain controls the body.
Yeah, so the brain is a controlling network for the body, yes. What's the central nervous system?
Yeah, so I liken it to a remote controlled type device, where if you consider like a remote control car having some sort of control board that has an antenna receiver, and it's transmitted through the waves, and you can actually control the vehicle. Now, I don't know if see, that's probably a simplistic way of putting it. It's probably a lot more complex and a lot more ineffable to even try to explain something on a physical level like this, as you were saying. But I guess I'm just trying to ask the scientists that are, saying that the brain is a processing piece of flesh that basically categorizes and archives memory on a timeline. And I just don't see how anybody could explain something like that.
Yeah, as I
Because you
say,
can literally go and pull a.
It hasn't actually been shown that memory is
Go for it.
located in the brain. You can have diseases of the brain that make it difficult to retrieve memory, but that again doesn't mean that the memory is actually there in the brain any more than if you take the batteries out of your computer, out of your radio, it won't play the song, but that doesn't prove that it was singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true, and I like that analogy. I remember hearing that in the book. But Michael Shermer, very well-known skeptic, he did a lot of research on near-death experiences as well. And I don't know if you looked into Michael Shermer at all, but he basically was pointing out that like near-death experiences can be explained because I don't know if it's like the neural cortex or something. There's some sort of
I mean, none of this would explain the veridical experiences where they perceive things that they couldn't have known about. Now, a lot of people who are characterized as skeptics, I would actually characterize as people of faith. You see, they have faith in this notion of materialism. Like Richard Dawkins is often, has this nickname of the atheist pope and so on. That they actually does become an article of faith, and people, that when Rupert Sheldrake's book came out, one of his earlier books decades ago, the chap who was the editor of the journal Nature, which is one of the top scientific journals in the world at the time, he said that he described Rupert Sheldrake is a biologist who does research into empirical evidence that the mind is much bigger than the five senses and so on. There's more to it than that, but he wrote about this in a book, and and it was declared by the editor of Nature to be a piece of total heresy that was only fit for burning. Now that could have been something that, the way that the early church might have, said about Galileo. Do you see that they try to imply that people who want to look beyond the atom and see things a bit deeper, that they're the skeptics, they're the sensible, grounded ones who are only interested in the evidence. But actually, it's many people who study what is beyond the atom, beyond the brain, and so on, are actually doing it based on scientific evidence. And it's actually the people who call themselves the skeptics who are actually the ones who are actually peddling pseudoscience and are stuck in that to their faith in matter being all that there is, despite the fact that quantum theory effectively disproved that nearly 100 years ago.
But you had mentioned Sheldrake, and I actually have been, I followed his work for a little while now, and I've seen him on a TED Talk, and I really appreciate his work on consciousness, and now I've also been looking into a little bit as far as like tetrahedrons and things like that basically talk about the building blocks of reality. Do you have any thoughts on like tetrahedrons and things like that, or?
Well, tetrahedron is it's probably one of the simplest shapes that defines three dimensions. But I used to be very interested in shapes and so on, and until it was pointed out to me that actually that shapes are just arrangements of separate points. Okay, separation is effectively. I go into this in a great depth in the book, but that actually if you consider the nature of time and the nature of consciousness, it's very simple to prove with very few logical steps that consciousness must be eternal, that you have no beginning and end. And NDEs are a clue to that, if you like, but you can actually derive it from simple first principles. Now, so consciousness has no beginning, but the physical universe does have a beginning. Okay, and so what's actually beginning is not our existence in consciousness, but our separation from each other. Okay, and so it is that separation from each other which is actually space and time. It's the same thing. When these great teachers, like for example Jesus of Nazareth and the Buddha and so on, spoke about love and compassion, loving your neighbor as yourself, it was based on not a sort of religious instruction or order. It was just simply a statement of rational, reasonable fact, that it stands to reason that actually if consciousness is eternal, but the universe isn't, the universe began, and it's only once there's a universe that you have space and time and separate points, that we must all be one in the state beyond the Big Bang, if you like. And it was that they were alluding to. So shapes are only expressions of separation, but what the image on the shroud stands testament to is that there is a way of being that goes the opposite to separating, that brings together rather than dividing, that goes against the momentum of the physical universe, which is known in science as the second law of thermodynamics, that breaks everything up. But what Jesus of Nazareth was demonstrating through what he taught and how he lived, again, not as a religious point, but just as a simple point of reason, is that by uniting rather than dividing, you could escape that momentum that breaks everything up, and you could achieve that eternal scope of existence, and things like shape and frequency and so on then are no longer of relevance to you. What is of relevance is what not what colors and things people see, but what is there behind their eyes. That's what you would get to value more. The fact that a person is precious because they can perceive and they can choose, and sort of geometry and patterns and so on is not so relevant to that.
So what are your thoughts on consciousness as far as individuality? So like so we're interacting here and we're both operating
Indeed.
from our own consciousness. Now does that mean that we are actually
I heard the start of that. You were talking about our
doing a little
whether the fact that we are interacting and that we are individual conscious beings. How does that happen? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's an excellent question, and I would say that our separation from each other is also the same as our separation from our full and true potential. So that there's two different states of being conscious. One is as the all, as all knowing, all caring, beyond space and time, and this I think is what often gets alluded to by different religions, and they each have a different label to it, whether you call it God or the Buddha nature or the Godhead or whatever. But basically, that's a state of being in which we're all one. It's people are getting a glimpse towards that state when they see the light that they see in NDEs. Okay, when they perceive this light, which they say was all knowing and all caring, and they felt loved by that light that they perceived. So that I believe and I believe this not out of a matter of faith or from some revelation, but just because it makes sense. I believe that is our source, our origin is from that state, but we have become less than that. And in becoming less than it, we become separate from it and also from each other. And our separation, our individual identity is defined by the ways in which we are less than it. I'm not sure how much of that came through.
Okay, I'm going to try this from my computer and see if it's any better.
Okay, you're sounding a bit clearer now.
My computer's back up and running, so I was going to try it from this angle here. My apologies for the technical problems, but it's what I've been fighting with over the last like month or so with my computer. So
I don't have problems with my smartphone because I don't have a smartphone.
It's probably for the better. I wouldn't recommend against it at this time. But anyways, I'm not sure exactly where we left off. I think it had something to do with
you were asking the question about that we're here now talking to each other as individual conscious entities, and sort of asking my view on how that happens. How do conscious entities come to exist and be distinct and so on? And I was answering that, but I believe that the connection went during that time, so I don't think the viewers heard it. But basically what I was saying is that there is evidence, which I do go into great detail in the book regarding, that points to the fact that consciousness is eternal, which means it has no beginning as well as having no end, and NDEs are a clue to that. When you see that consciousness doesn't depend on a material thing such as a brain. Now, if consciousness doesn't depend on matter, then it doesn't depend on the physical universe at all. But the universe had a beginning, and so the universe having a beginning is when space and time happened. Separation, you're asking about tetrahedron, so shapes, geometry, and so on, are only relevant once space happens. So once there is such a thing as separation. And so I was saying that based on reasoned argument, it appears that beyond the Big Bang, if you like, without needing physical universes, that consciousness exists still. but that consciousness wouldn't be divided and separate and individuated as you and me and everyone else, because that separation depends on space and time in order to be separate, and we have material bodies through which we express our separation and so on. And so there are these two different states. One of the all of consciousness, all together, being all knowing and being all together, or each containing the other. That's basically what something close to it is what people are perhaps perceiving as the light that they see in the near-death experience. That they perceive this light, which is all knowing and all caring. That they feel loved by that light. And so in various religions, people have different labels that they give, whether they call it the Godhead, or the Buddha nature, but this state of being, which is all one and all inclusive of all conscious being. Okay, so then we have, in terms of physical universes happening, that is us becoming less than our potential of being the all, and therefore different from it, and therefore different from each other. And our difference from each other is the pattern in which we are restricted. We are less than the all, and so that's how I believe individual conscious beings such as you and I exist.
So let me ask you a question in regards, and I want to contrast the concept of Jesus coming out of his body in the form of a spiritual form, and basically having some sort of consciousness transcending the body. Does that somehow relate to us on an individual level, in the sense that
Yes,
we are also given a certain capacity that, like Jesus had?
right. Well, I would say that capacity is not. I don't see it as given to us. I would see it as taken away from ourselves. So
Yes.
our natural state would be to have all capacity, but we have made ourselves less. It's not that God is doling out bits of capacity and giving them to us, but that we have we're only restricted or less than that because we have made ourselves so. The specific example of the event that formed the image on the shroud, we must remember that this was after he had died, and we know that forensically from looking at the blood stains on the cloth, that it was a dead body that was put in that cloth, because if anyone who's spent much time in emergency rooms, as I have, you know that if someone has a very lacerated scalp, as you could see he did, it just pours with blood. And but you can see there's only little spots of blood on there, which implied that he had stopped bleeding. That all that you're seeing is the still moist clots of blood that are the material from that is going onto the cloth to cause the staining. Now, as an American physician from Boston, Dr. Gilbert Lavoie, pointed out, there are actually two different events we see on the shroud. One is the blood stains, which is a simple physical process, very easy to understand and account for. And the second is the image, and they happened in different ways and in different positions. That the bloodstains appear to have happened while the body was laid out flat on its back, which we medically would call that supine. Okay, and then something happened that the body appears to have risen up vertically, suspended above the ground, and there was a burst of radiant energy that went forwards and backwards to form the image on the cloth. And this was I make a case in the book, from a change that was happening in the atoms of that body, and to do with the basically it's Professor David Bohm who pointed out, who was a very eminent quantum physicist, who pointed out that matter is actually frozen light. Okay, and that's what that is what the equations of something called quantum field theory suggest, that actually material.
No, I want to expand on this like more than you know, because
Okay.
this is something I've been looking into even before I even started looking into your work. Field theory basically is suggesting that light is not necessarily a traveling photon, but it's I don't know, a protobating response from a field, I guess you could say.
Okay. Well, that basically this thing called the Higgs field that influences the light that is going backwards and forwards, as it were, and is what is responsible for physical particles having mass and therefore substance and so on. Well, he pointed out this that quantum field theory says that matter is frozen light. Now, and that the thing about light, and this is something that has been known sort of ever since 1905, when Einstein published his special theory of relativity, is that, which is interesting because it's one of the only ever major scientific papers that didn't have any references. He didn't ask anyone to read anything else because they didn't need to. It was all in that little paper he wrote. But anyway, at the speed of light, the closer you get to the speed of light, you get this thing called the time dilation effect. If you're actually at the speed of light, then traveling from A to B, okay, what would look from us as not being sort of, if we have physical bodies and we see light go from one place to another, okay, but from the light perspective of light itself, there's no distance between A and B, and no time passes between A and B. That time and that distance only appear when you stop being light, if you like, when you take on a reference frame that is material rather than light, that's matter based rather than light. And he made this point when he was asked in an interview, why is light so often used as a metaphor in sort of spiritual things? And he made the point that from the perspective of light, everything is one, in that sense, that separation isn't relevant because there's no space and time as light. And so basically what the point that I make in the book is that through what he taught and how he lived, that's what made him able to unfreeze those atoms so that they began to shine, and that it's not just something unique to him, but he was demonstrating something that is potential that is common to all human beings. And in fact, he was always at pains to point this out. He said that all these things you see me do, you also can do, and greater than these can you do. I think that someone told me that was, I think, John chapter 14, that he'd never wanted to set himself up on a pedestal. He was always showing the potential of all human beings. And for example, and people said, how can you refer to yourself in the same breath and talking about God? And he said, is it not written in the law that you are gods and children of the Most High? So basically, I think we do him a disservice when we package him up, put him in a box, and give him a religious denomination or put all sorts of dogma around him. If you actually look at what he taught and what he did, it wasn't actually asking people to saying you have to form institutions or follow institutions. He was just making sense and talking reason and showing the potential of all humanity.
Yeah, this is really, my mind is racing because I want to test all these things that we're talking about. Now, real quick, I just want to point out, can you hear? Because I see that you're buffering on mine, so hopefully we're not having issues. It catches up.
I can hear you. You're slightly buffering, but I
was hoping to... Oh, okay. So it looks like we're both buffering. Sorry about that. Okay, so just real quick, I wanted to touch on bioluminescence. Are you? Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I can hear you fine.
Am I still buffering?
You can't hear me then.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah. No, I can hear you.
Good. So I'm not suggesting that the process that formed the image on the shroud is the same process that by which fireflies are shine or anything like that. It's not a biological process. It's a process to do with the very happening right at the atomic level, and it's related to how mind and matter, where mind and matter meet, so to speak. So it's not a biological phenomenon. In fact, it happened after his biology had stopped. The body was dead at the time that the image formed on the shroud. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm sorry about the buffering, but anyways, we'll just keep pushing forward. We're about close to an hour, but here in a little bit we can. I would like to have an opportunity to talk to you about a couple other questions that I have in regards to. Well, I want to talk about time, but real quick, yes. I want to talk about this. I guess the saying Christ consciousness. Now, I know that a lot of people will look to this concept of Jesus being just kind of the, kind of I'm trying to think of the word. I almost said a prototype of what our capacity is, and
well, yeah, I mean, actually, I think the term Christ from the Greek meaning the anointed one it's more of a sort of I think a political thing rather than that people when they those who wanted him to be a leader against the Romans and so on. That actually, it's basically the consciousness that I'm referring to, which is our original source state, is what I would say he achieved as Jesus of Nazareth. He showed that is still possible in this subtracted state in which we are now. It's not a prototype. He wasn't a sort of a machine or a technological thing, but he was a person, a human being who had thoughts and feelings and experiences, who managed to achieve something that all of us can achieve, and showed us that it was possible.
Yeah. Another thought that I had along the lines of what you were saying was God being this Trinity. And as far as Trinity is concerned, I mean, people understand God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit kind of thing. And we are almost likened to the Son part of it, because we are the flesh that is manifest. So are we kind of like...
Well, you see, I think that there's been a lot of, over the years, various dogmas have been sort of overlain on something which is actually something that is actually very simple, and that the problem is that it tends to become complicated when we try and make more labels and divisions and classifications. But basically, I would say that you can see existence in terms of two fundamental momentums. Either you separate and divide, as the physical universe has done and is doing and is breaking apart through doing, or you bring together. And that's what something that Jesus demonstrated through his life and his reference to loving one's neighbor as oneself, and that in doing that you can undo the restrictions that make us limited and that make us take on physical bodies, and you can actually become even more than that light that people perceive in NDEs, so that you're actually no longer, there's no suffering there, there's no pain and death. In fact, it's interesting that we have this notion that that we associate when we think about life and death. We think about life as what we're doing, and when people's bodies stop functioning, we call that death, and we associate that, oh, there's dead bodies, but we're the ones lugging bodies around with us. Those who we call dead are perhaps, maybe in many ways, actually more alive than we are when we're stuck in a physical body. But it still has a use that we can put that to, in terms of making change happen, so that through because time, which happens within the physical realm, allows for change to happen, and so through change one can become beyond time and establish and join one's eternal status.
Yeah, so I want to touch real quick on our abilities to unlock this part of us that are basically being suppressed. Because I actually spoke with Eben Alexander. I'm guessing you probably know who that is.
I've met him, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually, he was basically explaining that he feels that the brain is really the limitation that prevents us from understanding who we really are. And now, but kind of like a resistor, electrically speaking, it suppresses electricity.
I would say that we are at a fundamental level what stops us from realizing what we really are. So the problem is that we associate what we really are with the ego, with the self, and what people like Jesus taught in, loving your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is yourself. That what you actually that's why he said things like, anything you do to anyone, you do that to me. If you're kind to someone, you're kind to me. If you hurt someone, you're hurting me. That's not just for him, that's for anyone who has empathy. And if you have empathy, you what you are is more than this few square feet of flesh that you call your body, because you are invested, if you like, in terms of what matters to you, in meaning, in all the other people as well.
So there's something fundamental about, because you brought it up several times, and that is like us being empathetic and loving, and there's almost like some sort of purpose behind that, in this, because you see it written all over near-death experiences, is just loving and caring for your brothers and sisters in the world, and that's really the key to reality.
Yeah, in a sense, this is the interesting thing, that that is what achieves the getting beyond the restrictions and so on, and reaching that eternity. But in a sense, in the purest sense, you could say it never has a purpose, because if it had a purpose, it would be conditional. You don't love someone because it's a good idea, because if you love, then such and such will happen. It's just something that is implicit in what you are. So it's not something you can choose to do, but what you can choose to do is to understand what a human being is a bit more, and in recognizing that, then you may perceive what great value there is in every human being, whatever nationality, color, religion, ethnicity, gender, whatever, all these different ways that we divide people up. That's irrelevant to actually the what is at the core of the being of all of those human beings. And that if you value that so much, then because it's so precious to you, you will care about it, and that the fact that you do will undo the restrictions that hold you bound in separation, and make you subject to the second law of thermodynamics, to become less than you once were. Not that your body will still sort of will grow old if you have one, but what he was showing, what Jesus of Nazareth showed, is that existence, and what we see from the near-death experiences as well, existence and consciousness don't actually require to have physicality. They don't require a physical body.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the direction to go with this. So I kind of want to talk to you about the fundamentals of our reality. So like, you know, it's almost like we're a wind-up toy that basically is given a certain length of time that we're going to be here to experience, or you know, like maybe there was some sort of predestined reason for why we're here, like a pre-existence, you might say. And again, that's looked at through the lens of time, and time is really just the filter that we've created to understand experience and progression. And I feel like you know, like synchronicity and you know, things that really identify to us being on a certain path, or somehow like maybe somebody is guiding us through our reality, like an angel or something, or I've almost likened it to like us being in a video game or something, and you know, we're being sent through this reality in order to achieve some sort of higher consciousness or higher.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't perceive, to me, the notion of eternal perfect being beyond time doesn't equate to a sort of directive puppet master, as it were, who is actually putting you here, putting you there, making you be born here, making someone else be born there. I don't think that we're put here. I think we bring ourselves here. And in fact, if you look at a lot of near-death experiences, that's what people report, that's what they were seeing as people, you know, that they were going in one direction, you know, away from physical life, and they saw other people coming towards it to be born, and that they're doing that because, you know, if you have a conscience and you realize that you have wronged someone, that conscience, once the body has gone, might be more clear, might be clearer, so that you want to do something about it. So it's not that you get put somewhere to learn something. It's that's where you end up. And of course, not everything that happens in the world is fair, not by any means, and that's partly because of the immense cruelty of human beings to each other, and also to do with the chaos of being in a physical universe. That once we're here, we're subject to asteroids, earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, and all of these types of pandemics, whatever. That we're subject to because we're physical. And what people like Jesus and the Buddha and many others were alluding to is that there's another way of being, that you don't have to be relying on having to incarnate in physical bodies, if you can free your mind to the point where it's no longer necessary, where you don't have to be distinct and separate.
Can I tell you a quick story? Like I've the more I indulge my thoughts into this, you know, these studies and stuff like that, I almost feel like the more deep I get into it, the more I start processing, and the more I almost feel like I have some sort of confirmation, like when I'm doing research, and like, oh my gosh, I've learned something that is really validating the direction that I'm going with my research. And I started feeling like there was something unlocking in my mind, like I had some sort of surreal type feeling. And but then I actually had a couple dreams where I felt, you know how you can carry your daily life into your dreams, and you start experiencing them in your dreams. And I had a dream. So I had two dreams, and I'll just quickly tell you. My first dream was that my wife, I noticed that she had a positive pregnancy test, And now, mind you, I didn't know that she was pregnant by any means, but I woke up the next day and I told her she should take a pregnancy test because it was a very vivid dream. It was almost like it was a message to me. And I was like, well, I didn't know what to think about it, but I just told her, and like, she said, I don't have any reason to feel like I'm pregnant, so I'm not going to take a pregnancy test. And then later the next day, I was nagging her, so she ended up taking a pregnancy test. It was decisively positive. It was a very dark line. And so now, granted, maybe I was reading the cues of her, like, you know, being early signs of pregnancy, but or maybe in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wonder if she's pregnant because she's acting like, or whatever. But the other dream was a friend of mine, actually, a very close friend, actually. I saw him jump off of a building, and I thought he committed suicide. So the next day, again, this is a very vivid dream. The dream stuck with me. And sometimes dreams just kind of fade off and you just don't remember them. But this is a dream that I remembered very vividly. So I called my friend and I'm like, are you okay? I feel like I needed to check on you and make sure everything's okay. And then he's like, yeah, I'm fine. Not 2 months later, he fell off of a 2-story house and he broke his leg. And he told his mom, Charlie had a dream that I was going to fall off of a building. And so I don't know if this is a coincidence or if it's
I don't think it is. In fact, there is so much evidence of these things that that I think they just can't all be coincidence. I actually don't think there is such a thing as coincidence.
Yeah. It was exciting to me. At the same time as like I was like feeling really worried about my friend, like, is he going to be okay? But the other thing is that he actually attempted suicide a couple weeks before that, which I wonder if that somehow, like, you know, blurred the lines a little bit on what my dream was projecting to me. Like maybe he did try to commit suicide, but he needed to fall off of a building to wake up. And he actually said that he had kind of a near-death experience type thing where he didn't like see anything, but he believed he was in this place. He said he was outside of his body, and he said he knew like everything was going to be okay. Like somehow in his mind, like he didn't need to process. It just was there. He knew everything was going to be
lots of people report when someone has a near-death experience. Many other people who are close to that person have an experience of that person speaking to them. I think they call them deathbed visitations. And there's a lot of research has been done on this by the NDE researchers. It's a very, very common thing. Yeah, in fact, it's also very common amongst medical staff that people see when somebody dies, they see something leaving the body. This has been found statistically that it's a very common thing. And I mean, for example, we mentioned Sheldrake earlier. He tells an anecdote that often he'll give lectures to whole rooms full of scientists, you know, talking about people's experience of the so-called paranormal, and you know, and no one will respond, and they'll all imply that there's no such thing. But then several of them will each come up to him individually, and say, "I've never tell the others, but I've had these experiences myself." But you see, the thing is, of course, my part of the book, what I'm actually saying is that it's actually, there's no such thing as paranormal. This is actually normal. And if you think about it, when we say paranormal, we're referring either to what we call extrasensory perception or mind over matter. But one of the points that I make in the book is actually all perception is extrasensory, because the eye doesn't see. And people say, oh no, yeah, but the eye transmits information to the brain and the brain sees. But it's not the brain that sees either, because once the brain is stopped functioning, then in an NDE, people still see. Okay, so it's not the sense. No perception is through the senses. And then people say mind over matter, but if there is such a thing as free will, and our whole systems of legality, morality, ethics, and everything all assume that there is such a thing as free will, because we always will, even people who say they don't believe in free will be annoyed at someone for doing something bad to them. But if there's no free will, then why are they annoyed? They had to do it. So we all actually believe in free will, whether we notionally believe in it or not. And if free will exists, right, free will is mind over matter. What else is it? So extrasensory perception and mind over matter are the backdrop to all of our experience in our everyday moments of everyday life. And yet people wonder, oh, I wonder if there's such a thing as ESP or mind over matter. See, it's ironic that we're how sort of we when we try and learn, sometimes we can be like a hamster on a wheel, just going round and round, and without seeing the obvious that, you know, we need to get off the wheel to find the cheese.
Yeah, well, that kind of opens up a topic that I always am discussing, and that is the philosophy of interpretation. And basically, people are constantly looking for confirmation bias, and they don't necessarily have interest in decoding or unraveling the mysteries. They would rather just find information that validates their perspective. And obviously
ignore information that doesn't. You see, when if you get a debate about something like telepathy and so on, then what you'll find is that the people who don't believe in it, they're not interested in seeing the evidence, because they already know and believe they do a priori it can't be possible. So because it can't be possible, I'm not going to look at the evidence. So they are actually more dogmatic than the people that they love to accuse of being dogmatic, which is usually those who believe in something beyond the atom, you know, whether it's religion or whatever it is that they believe in, and they're always criticizing them for looking at faith and not evidence. But it's actually the materialist scientists, not all scientists, because there are many scientists who are not materialist in their outlook, but the sort of people who are dogmatically materialist are actually more people of faith often than the people in religions.
Yeah, I feel like there's dogma in just about every perspective that I mean, whether it's politics, social media obviously is all about that, but I feel like just media in general projects information that they want you to know or believe. And I mean that. So again, I'm my channel name is called 4BZ Truth, and the reason well, it's Forbes. My last name is Forbes, but 4BZ is kind of like an acronym. But anyway, I'm focused on truth, and I feel like truth, a lot of times people will say, is subjective, and I believe there is some gray area with truth, but for the most part, I feel like truth. If you are authentically pursuing, truth as an outcome, you're going to be putting your own beliefs to the test. And I feel like that is, I mean, because I originated from a house of, evangelical Christian, you might say, and honestly, I haven't fully broken away from that mindset, but I've more so expanded my understanding of what Jesus was saying, and the mainstream church is not talking about it, and it's more dogmatic in a lot of ways, like you're saying. So, so that's why I'm open-minded to other perspective. And to be honest with you, there's things, that a lot of people are saying that I bring on that I'm not fully on board with what they're saying necessarily, but I like to contrast and learn from others' perspectives. So now, by the way, I appreciate your willingness to come on and actually appease my ventures, because in a lot of ways I'm actually trying to pick your brain for my own research. But I have a series called Patterns of Reality, And so basically, it kind of stemmed from that documentary I did. And I make these 20, 25-minute videos that pertain to, intelligence behind our reality. And intelligence you might call consciousness, right? I'm just trying to, decode what's happening. And so real quick, I don't want to lose my opportunity to talk about time. Now, you had touched a little bit on time in your book, and
quite a lot,
honestly, there's a lot of stuff that you were talking about that I felt like was like, woo, it was like over my head. It's like I need to analyze some of the stuff that you're presenting. And I want to talk a little bit about time on your.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, when what people often may not be aware of is that in terms of physics, the understanding of time, it doesn't include a sense of a present moment or a flow of time, if you like, or now. But yet these are there in all of our experience. We are always in the now. All of our experience, you can think, oh yes, but my memories are in the past. But your memories of the past are experienced by you in the present, as are your thoughts about the future. It always exists within the present. Well, whereas in physics, if you have like an equation describing, say, a ball that bounces up and down, okay, all the positions of that ball as it goes up and down, you can plot them on a graph, and that will all of the positions and moments that it are all there together. And you could do that, if you like, for the universe, from the Big Bang right through to the heat death, that all of those moments would be there together. But that's not how we see it. That's not how we experience. We are always in the now. And this is because it's only within consciousness that there is a now. And this is the point that made people like Erwin Schrödinger, the founder of quantum physics, realize that actually consciousness is what makes time. There is no time without consciousness. The beginning and end of the universe would be instantaneous together, if not for there being consciousness in between. And so because consciousness is what makes time, time cannot make or unmake consciousness. That's the next step from there, is that and if time can't make or unmake you, then that means you can't have a beginning or an end. You must be eternal. So you see, from that very simple point that I think is unassailable logic, and no one so far has shown me any flaws in it, that demonstrates that you're eternal. And as we say, you're eternal, but the universe had a beginning, the Big Bang. Okay, so how does that work? Because how can you not have a beginning and yet the universe had a beginning? Now, you must exist beyond the universe. But if you existed beyond the universe, and yet, as you say, we're here as separate individuals, we're separate individuals in space and time. Space is separation. So in that state beyond the universe, beyond the Big Bang, we exist there, but we don't exist there as separate individuals. We exist there as all one. As one, and because that state is beyond time, it's still here now. It's always and eternally there. So there are two sides of our existence, and I think that's why, for example, Jesus was alluding to the fact that, is it not written, you are God, talking about all the the people around him, that you have that aspect of you which never changes, and is the potential that this other part of you, which is now the separate part of you, can attain that prior state. And he demonstrated how to do it through his life, and in doing it, that's what I argue in the book. It's difficult to put it very quickly, but in the chapters of the book it will show how that was achieved. And now the thing is, you see, so that's time is you have a now. Now, this ties us on to this notion of so-called AI, artificial intelligence, which, as I've said, is a contradiction in terms, because if it's artificial, it can't be sentient, and so it has no now. It's just inanimate object, anything that is an object that's artificial, a machine, a computer, or whatever. And so that's where the danger is, in people blurring the boundaries, and because people judge by the senses and how things look. So if you make a robot that functions according to, in quotes, AI, and you give it sort of human type features and a soft skin, so it and facial expressions and so on, then people get convinced. They think that this is the real deal just because it looks and sounds like a human being. They forget that it's a machine. And the danger is, and this is what led, for example, there's institutes of learning in the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge, both in England. In Oxford, they have the Future of Humanity Institute, and in Cambridge, they have the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, where all these leading minds and professors and so on, who during his lifetime included Stephen Hawking, people like Lord Martin Rees and so on, that look at what could be the things that could put humanity's very existence in jeopardy. Now, apart from things like nuclear war and climate change and asteroids and so on, the one thing that is very likely, it's thought, to lead to the extinction of humanity is being supplanted by machines. They say that people like Hawking and Martin Rees have said that if you were to have contact from an alien planet, what you would most likely get from them is not living beings, because once technology takes a hold, the time when their living beings are still around is quite short. It very quickly becomes the case that you have artificial derivative beings that are not living, that are not conscious, and that people, because of this craziness, that they think that they are just information, they're just ones and zeros, that in the connectome of the brain, or whatever they call it, that they believe that they can upload that into a machine, and that will then be them. So then they'll say, oh, well, I can just once we've done that, then just put my body in the incinerator, because that's not me. My information is in the computer. And this is how that mankind goes extinct, not with a bang, but with a whimper, as it were, as people acquiesce into this crazy notion that we are merely information, we're a program, we're a software, and that a machine could hold it. And that's one of the main themes of the book, is a call to anyone who will listen. Don't follow what's coming, to let yourself become implanted and uploaded and so on. That's not that's not the way to achieve eternity. In fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Elon Musk is coming out with this like surgical arm that looks like a scorpion or something, and basically it implants into your brain a chip, and it somehow communicates with your brain, and it basically starts writing on kind of the cloud your thought patterns and things like that. And basically the concept is trying to become transhuman, I guess, in writing your thoughts into the into a data memory. It's kind of silly to me, but
I think it's far worse than silly. I think it's deadly, and it's dangerous, and I would never recommend that anyone allows that to happen to them.
Yeah. I don't know the fullness of your investigation or your background as far as the Bible is concerned, because I do talk a lot about the Bible, because I consider myself a Christian, but I often look at like biblical prophecy and things like that, and how there are things that were almost like warnings. And I don't know what your thoughts are on any of that kind of stuff, but
right. Well, of course, the term Christian came about a couple of 100 years after Jesus, but his teachings were already there before that, and people who followed him and followed his teachings were there before that. And I personally, I don't think he intended to found an institution. In fact, if you listen to read his own words in the Bible, when he was asked about his purpose and so on, he said, "I was born for one reason only, to bear witness to the truth." So not to found an institution or and so on. And I think there's a lot that has been through various councils of when the the Roman Empire took over the running of a lot of things, that there were certain books that were sort of thrown out, like the Gnostic texts and so on, that were also maybe be relevant in terms of understanding what he said. But having said that, I think that there is a lot of valuable things that are in the what's known as the New Testament as well.
Yeah, I actually feel like there's a lot of symbology, and that's kind of where a lot of the Gnostics were taking the symbology or the symbolism in these things and trying to interpret it in a way that was relevant to their time. And anyways, I didn't want to necessarily get theological, but I definitely feel like, this concept of time, and I've talked to, like, I don't know if you know who Howard Storm is, but he's another one I interviewed. And we talked about time being like the eternal now. So you actually say that time is just kind of a viewing lens, or our capacity is is almost slowing things down to. I don't know how to explain it. You explained it better than I do. But anyways, I appreciate touching on this topic because I think a lot of people kind of have a presumption when they're analyzing information, and like in terms of time or years or billions of years or whatever, I feel like there's some sort of requirement of time in order to progress to the fullness that we have evolution. As far as evolution is concerned?
Well, I mean, I would say time happens through us becoming not becoming more, but because we have become less. That we can become more. If in the state beyond the Big Bang, if you like, we were all one, and now we're all divided, and we have restrictions that divide us further. Through selfishness, anything that racism, any kind of prejudice, and so on, that materialism that divides us from our true potential and divides us from each other. That tends to actually propagate itself and become more. Those restrictions, they don't of themselves automatically become less. And I think actually, you were mentioning the quotes of what Jesus said in the Bible, and I think one of the things that he said about time that is very relevant was when he was speaking about that this world has one with moths that eat everything, and rust that corrupts it, and thieves that break in and steal. But there's another way of being where there isn't moths, rust, and thieves. But moth, rust, and thieves is basically talking about what physicists now call the second law of thermodynamics, and that's known as the arrow of time, often by physicists. And he was alluding to another state beyond that, which doesn't happen automatically. There's no sort of evolutionary process that's going to make us become more enlightened and more caring and so on. We have to make the effort to overcome our own ignorance, I suppose, and to understand each other and ourselves better, and to be able to achieve it.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Silverman, we're getting closer to the end of the show, but I just wanted to give my listeners an opportunity to come up with some of the questions that they want to ask you. We've had people coming and going throughout the show, but anybody listening now, if you have any specific questions that you want to in the comment section, I'll definitely display them. Now, I see currently, and I'm not sure if these people are here anymore, but this is Project Gaia. And then Bama is here. The real Yoda's here. Anyways, there's some random drop-ins here, but again, like my channel focuses a lot on like consciousness and things like that. And honestly, this is very appealing to the. Can you put your book on the screen there again?
Yeah,
and
sure.
show people the burst of conscious light. And he definitely. There's a lot of research that went into this. A lot of yeah. So it seemed like the Shroud of Turin was kind of the basis for the research, and then it kind of branched out from there.
Yeah, those two sort of things, understanding how a human being could result in that burst of light from a dead body, and also investigating the nature of consciousness.
Yeah. So you know, just to kind of wrap up this thought process, I have another question for you in light of the events that we're going through in this world. I mean, you had spoken a little bit about like challenges in our world and things like that we're faced with, and people that are, you know, it's almost like there's some sort of refining process. Like I actually look at the word tribulation, like it's known to be refinement. It's a refinement process. And so I look at any turmoil that happens in the world as tribulation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be person invoked, but it could be, you know, like somebody falls off a house and breaks his leg, like my friend. But anyways, you know, I was thinking a lot about the COVID stuff, and you actually, you're a clinician. Or remind me, like, what your area of medical focus is.
Right. I'm what they call in the UK general practitioner. So I think the closest thing in the US is family physician. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, so it's clinician. It's somebody that has a family practice, or you work for a family practice kind of thing?
Yeah, I've got a surgery which actually I don't know if you know, we have something called a national health service here. So that means I have patients rather than customers, as it were. They don't have to pay me. It's all funded by the government.
Okay, so now. Are you seeing a resurgence or like a second wave, you might say, as far as people, or have you had to deal with these kind of patients at all?
Well, actually, in this country, they have had what something known as COVID hubs. So I think some of the civil servants may have made the politicians aware that that basically over 90% of the work of the health service is done by general practitioners and or from primary care as a whole. And if patients with COVID were assessed and treated in GP surgery, so that the infection were spread around the surgery, then probably a lot of the surgeries would end up being closed and not able to function because of infection there. So they made separate what they call it, cold and hot. So the hot hubs, as it were, where people go if they've actually got the symptoms, are somewhere else. And it's not the field that I personally work in, so I don't come into direct contact with the COVID patients. So either in the hubs, or if they're very unwell, of course, they need to be admitted into hospitals, and sometimes intensive care units within hospitals.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of. So my brother just was diagnosed. Well, he took a test, and he was positive for COVID-19, and he actually has been recovering. So he actually is on the upward trend, you might say. And now in Idaho, I live in Boise, Idaho, and you know, our state is pretty small population wise. I mean, our metropolitan has about 500,000 people. but that's like half the state's population, and it's a lot of open, like mountain range and stuff. Other than that, but anyways, we have not had a lot of cases here. I mean, they've had what, like 8,000, maybe 9,000 total that were reported. Now, I actually feel like, so like I've been researching this quite a bit, and I feel like it actually goes back further than when they started recognizing it in the media. And I don't know what your thoughts are on like if it actually was going back even before, like during the wintertime.
Well, I mean, I think probably because you know, of the number of serious illness and fatalities that are associated with it, and because of how infectious it was. If it were there before, it would have rapidly spread before, and it would have become apparent before, in terms of the tip, because the tip of the iceberg that presents from it is the people in extremis are severely, you know, breathless and so on, the ones that end up in intensive care. And if it was around much before you know, the end of 2019, I suspect that would have been apparent, unless it you know, it was around but it hadn't mutated into that virulent strain yet. Then that's possible.
Okay, I gotta ask you one question straight up, but here's the thing. I don't want to talk about COVID after this, just because I'm sure you've probably seen enough about it, and you're like, but as far as face masks are concerned, is this something that you believe is a benefit to keeping a virus out of your airway?
Actually, the main benefit of the face mask is probably not keeping the virus out of the airway of the person wearing the face mask, but of keeping the virus within the face mask if you breathe it out. In the sense that the people, if everyone's wearing face masks, the benefit isn't to the person wearing it; it's to the other people. That you become less infectious to others, and if everyone is less infectious, then also everyone is less prone to catching an infection.
Okay. I just wanted to ask those questions because, again, I don't have many opportunities to speak to a physician or maybe not a physician, but a general practitioner.
But yeah, that's a physician.
Yeah, okay, so basically, you know, you've been kind of in the line of fire, so to speak, and I mean, I could speculate all day long, be an armchair quarterback or whatever, and I feel like if you know, having an opportunity to ask you directly, you have a little more credibility than me. So, we are coming down to about 15 minutes left. If there's kind of a summed up way that you would like to, you know, put the gist of what you're trying to project to the world, can you wrap it up in 15 minutes potentially?
Yeah, certainly. Right. So the book, as I said, is basically, it started with the premise of trying to understand how that burst of light that happened in the tomb in Judea, how such a thing could have happened. And I realized that perhaps to do this, one would have to consider the connection between mind and matter, because it can't just be a coincidence that all the evidence points to the person who was within that cloth having been the historical Jesus of Nazareth, who concerning whom this unique event happened, and also was also unique in terms of what he taught and how he lived. Now, people often ask the question, so are you saying it's a miracle? And actually, I'm not. I'll explain why. You know, if you look at all of the things that he did that people call miracles, and actually analyze what they were for, and actually every single one of them, when you think about it, it comes down to something very simple, that someone was suffering or in need, and he was, out of empathy for that person, he felt something for them and wanted to help them, and then the change happened, whether it was a leper being healed, or there were thousands of people who were hungry, who didn't have any food, and he felt for their empathy for what they were feeling. And so,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but can we touch a little bit on the maybe mind over matter, or the ability to heal? Is this something that you believe is possible?
Well, basically, if consciousness is totally primal and fundamental, and matter is totally derivative, then anything is possible. You see, that's why he said, faith the size of a mustard seed and the mountain can move. In fact, it's interesting that, because you can do the equation of how, if you released all the energy in the mass of a mustard seed, and how much rock you could move, and how far you could move it, and so on. But yes, so basically, that mind over matter is not a sort of obscure parapsychological thing that may or may not exist. Mind over matter is something fundamentally present in every single moment of our lives. Every time we make a decision, that's mind over matter. So, as I say, in understanding that, then there's no such. I don't need the word supernatural anymore, because it's natural. It's natural to have free will, and it's natural to perceive. So, and as we explained, perceiving means that the extrasensory perception is real also. And so, what was it that made him have that power to be able to do that? Was basically that he lived according to what he taught about loving one's neighbor as oneself. And in doing so, the separation that binds us into materiality, physicality, separation, time, space, and matter, can actually be undone. Now, the next step, as I say, was to say, okay, this is how mind and matter are related. That matter is a derivative of mind. That in mind you have awareness and will as the sort of input and output, if you like, for crudely, which translates down into when light is frozen as matter, you have force. You have physical force that is will is the primary cause, and enforcement is a secondary cause. So you hit something and it makes it accelerate away, and there's a reaction back to the thing that hit it, and so on. Right. So then tying from that to this is how about mind and matter being related. Look at mind itself and the nature of consciousness, and how consciousness is actually the creator of time. Because in physics there is no now in the equations of physics, except for consciousness making it so, because you are there within the now, and that's what puts the cursor, if you like, on that point of that you call now. And this being something that is actually therefore eternal. Your consciousness must be eternal, because it's the creator of time, so time can't make it or end it. And then to say from that you cannot, if consciousness can't begin, then by definition it can't be manufactured. So you can't make it from a cyborg or an android or a computer, right? Also, it can't be created. It means, therefore, that if our existence in separation is us becoming less than God, rather than God creating you and putting you on this world to teach you a lesson and to reward and punish you, and so on. And of course, that's not what people see in near-death experiences. They often find that there's in the light that they perceive that there's a loving being that's guiding them, but then in their life review, they experience all the everything that they've done in their life, and they experience it from the point of view of the other person. So any kindness that they did to others, they feel that kindness done to themselves. Any harm they did to others, they feel that. So in a sense, their conscience is judging themselves rather than God judging them.
Yeah.
Right. So if consciousness, so it can't be created and it can't be manufactured. It can't be uploaded either, because you are not information. They can never get, however complex you make and long you make a string of ones and zeros, which all information can be summarized in ones and zeros. You can never have enough ones and zeros to make that string of ones and zeros wake up and say, I am someone. It's always going to be something, never someone. And so you can't be a pattern of information. You're one who can perceive information. So because you are not information, therefore you cannot be uploaded. So this dream that people have of achieving eternity by uploading themselves into machines that then go out into the universe, it's crazy, and it's deadly, and it's actually completely missing the point that you already have eternity, because you are not made by your brain. You're not made by atoms. Atoms are a product of you. And so it helps us to understand the nature of time and the nature of eternity, and how eternity can be real. And the way to maximize our experience of it is not to limit ourselves to us as individual beings, but to realize that every single individual being has thoughts and feelings just as we do, and to recognize that deeply enough, that it matters deeply enough to us, that we care enough, that we live our lives in such a way that we value all of them, and recognize that, whatever nationality, color, religion, gender, whatever,
it's all
age, that it's all, that actually at root source consciousness is one, right? There's awareness and will. We're each aware of different things, and we make different choices, right? But the awareness and will are one. And when we see past the things that divide us, and then if we are able to live our lives as people like the Buddha and Jesus and others taught us, then we will, when we have our NDEs or death experiences, as it were, there'll be more instances where we'll be feeling the kindness we did to others rather than harm, because we won't have been so harmful to others, as it were. And we can then maximize our. So then there's the next point, is that that humanity is an endangered species. Okay, Lord Martin Rees, Professor Martin Rees wrote a book called Our Final Century, which was regarding the 21st century, and is this our final century? Are we getting to the point now where people are going to go so much into transhumanism and possible dangerous consequences of artificial intelligence? He did speak about other things in the book, like germ warfare and genetic engineering and other things. But the one thing that is a theme that's quite a common thread in all of these sort of learned scientists, and they look at possible scenarios in which we could become extinct, is through us becoming replaced by technological things that we have made, and through the unanticipated consequences of those technologies. So you have you program a computer system to try to, with good intentions, you think, trying to avoid to try and stop all human suffering. Now, to a machine, the most efficient way of stopping all human suffering is to wipe out all human beings, because if they're not there, they won't be suffering. To a machine, you see, this is the problem, and people wouldn't have anticipated that when they told the computer to do it. So there are many ways in which the Asimov rules don't work to try and make a machine to stop it from causing harm, because it can never really know what a sentient being actually is, because it can never know anything, because to know anything you have to be sentient yourself. So that's why.
Well, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
okay.
Just to kind of wrap up the last few minutes, maybe we can kind of rapid fire a couple questions from the audience. Now, I don't know if you can read that, but they want to know if you believe in God or supreme being, and is if you die, is your consciousness God?
Right. Well, you see, I think what people are alluding to when they talk about God or Allah or the Buddha nature or whatever it's called in different religions and beliefs, they're talking about the purest state of consciousness of the one, and that's why all being one. That's why all religions have the sense of unity of God, of God representing union and one, because it is it is all of us in our purest form, and I don't believe that we necessarily become that when we die, if we weren't that when we lived, because when we die, we all what we take with us is what we have made of through our life. So if we've been selfish and all the negative things that divide, then we don't suddenly stop being that when we've died and become God. We still have those traits that we have made by practicing them in our life, and that's why if we've caused harm through those traits, perhaps that might lead us to want to have another lifetime where we have a chance to try to put right some of the harm that we've done. It's not a fait accompli that we will put it right. We might actually, build up into even more harm. There's no guarantees, because it's only what we're making our own destiny here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and then Bama says he said, anything I do, you can do also. We lost our spiritual abilities from being kept from us, and it's told it's not possible. Okay, so that's just a statement. And then Dr. Silverman, you're welcome, or you're awesome. Thanks. And then this is the last question that I have here. Have you ever had a near-death experience, or maybe a spiritual experience of any kind?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to in a sense, we're all having spiritual experiences every time we're with people that we care about. That what I'm suggesting is that that the antidote to separation is something that we all contain within us, and is all expressed to the extent that we unite rather than divide. And to the extent that we do, then what we call spirit it's not actually a sort of magic ectoplasm that suddenly appears. It's just really not being stuck. So to the extent the way I see it is that if you're that light that people have in their NDEs, that they suddenly realize when they die, that, or when they're having their NDE, that was always there all the time, but we're sort of filtering it out because of our restriction and our and getting convinced that the real reality is this. It's, we're made of, we identify ourselves as being a lump of flesh, and see other people as that, which makes it easier to cause harm to those people, because they're just then objects. But when you see beyond that, when you see what's behind the eyes, and what feels, and you care more about that, then to some extent, some of those blinkers that are blocking away that light from you are reduced. So I think that we're in that sense, I would agree with Ibn Alexander, that there is a filter that is there, that is blocking it, but that filter, I would say, is made by our habits and patterns and limited, restricted thought and thinking and feeling.
Yeah, well, so to wrap it up, I feel like maybe a good takeaway is that relationship and love is really kind of the key to being able to fully experience this reality. And that's kind of my takeaway. I feel like with relationships.
Yeah. In the unconditional sense, that in the sense that once it's not bound only to those in your personal vicinity and so on, but that you see that what is in you and what is in your loved ones as that consciousness that is so valuable and so precious, is just exactly the same consciousness that's in all human beings.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Silverman, I appreciate your time. We're a couple minutes over, but I mean, I appreciate you spending 1 minute with us. So I appreciate everything.
I appreciate all the time you've spent as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, these are the things that I feel like we need to unpack, and I hope that it's not too late over there. I hope you get some rest.
That's kind of you. No, it's only 10 p.m. now, so yeah.
Yeah, so I still have a full day ahead of me. My son actually just woke up. You can see my my monitor, my baby monitor. I'm supposed to be watching him. So anyways, again, for all the audience listening, I appreciate it. Please click on the like button so that we can get this video out there. Everybody needs to hear what Dr. Silverman has to say. And you know, we need to have more of these conversations, and science needs to open their spiritual eyes a little bit. And yeah, so I appreciate it, and have a good day today. Okay.
Thank you very much. You too. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, have a good one. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.